The Mummy Returns by John Whitman. Chapter 1. The Scorpion King. Egypt 4000 before Christ. The tall, strong young man walks across the desert. There are a lot of dead soldiers, his soldiers, on the ground at his feet. After many great battles with the Egyptians, they will never see their homes in Akkad again. But the Scorpion King didn't die with his men because he wears the bracelet of Anubis on his arm. He stops and looks up into the sky. "I am the Scorpion King," he shouts. "Nobody can kill me." He walks away into the desert of Ahmshir. The Scorpion King carries his knife in one hand. It feels heavy because he is very tired. Suddenly, he hears horses and looks up again. He sees thousands of Egyptian soldiers on horseback. They want to kill the great king of Akkad. They want to stop the battles. The Scorpion King is going to die. Who can help him? He looks at the sky. "Anubis," he calls to the great god of the dead. "Please hear me. Help me today, and I will build a great pyramid of gold for you. And I will give you my life." The Scorpion King shouts loudly to the sky, but nobody answers him. The Egyptian soldiers are coming. His end is near. Then he feels something on his foot. It is a scorpion. The Scorpion King laughs and puts the animal in his mouth. He eats the scorpion, and suddenly he is strong again. Around him the desert changes into green trees and blue water. Behind him he sees 10,000 soldiers with faces of dogs. They are the soldiers of Anubis, and now they are going to fight for him. Now they are his soldiers. For the next year, the Scorpion King and the dog-faced soldiers move across Egypt and kill more and more Egyptians. Then, at the end of the year, the Scorpion King takes the city of Thebes. Anubis is waiting for him. "Your life is mine," says Anubis. "I want it today." "What will happen to my soldiers?" asked the Scorpion King. "You and these soldiers will live this life. You will sleep for 6,000 years." The Scorpion King feels very cold for a minute, and then he feels nothing for 6,000 years. People in Egypt told the story of the Scorpion King and the great pyramid of Anubis. In the year of the Scorpion, they said, he and his soldiers will wake up. They will begin their battles again, and this time they will kill everybody and everything. Somebody has to kill the Scorpion King, or the world will end. Many people knew the story, but nobody could find the desert of Ahmshir. Nobody could find the Scorpion King and stop him. Chapter 2. The Bracelet of Anubis. Egypt, near Hamunaptra, the city of the dead, 1933. Rick Connell walked around an underground room in a very old Egyptian temple with his wife Evelyn. She loved everything about Egypt and could read the old languages. She studied the country's temples and its old stories. Rick and Evelyn met 10 years earlier. They found the mummy of Imhotep in Hamunaptra in the desert. After 3,000 years, Imhotep woke up and tried to kill Evelyn. He wanted to be the king of Egypt first and then king of the world. But Rick fought with Imhotep and won. The mummy returned to his strange sleep below the ground of Hamunaptra, and Rick married Evelyn. "Dad! Dad!" a small boy shouted and ran into the big room. "What is it, Alex? It's dangerous down here," Rick said to his 8-year-old son. "But Dad, I saw your tattoo near the door up there." Alex looked at the tattoo on his dad's hand. It showed a pyramid with the eye of Horus in the center. Rick didn't know anything about his tattoo. It was there when he was a baby. "It's the same as the picture near the door. Come and see." "I'll come in a minute. Now I have to help your mom, and you have to go back up the stairs." In a different room, Evelyn and Connell studied a strange picture on a large door. It showed two people in a fight, not men, but beautiful young women. Evelyn couldn't see their faces, but she thought, I know these women. Where are they from? Where did I see them before? Maybe the answers are behind this door. Rick, come and help me, she shouted. I want to open this heavy door. Yes, madam, Rick said with a smile. His wife used her head, but Rick liked to work with his hands. He quickly opened the old door with his knife, and he and Evelyn walked into a dark room. It was full of scorpions and mummies. I know this place, said Evelyn. You know it from a book, Rick said. Somebody closed that door before you were born. No, Rick, I remember it. I know everything about this room. Evelyn moved into the next dark room, and suddenly it was 1290 before Christ. She saw one of the women from the picture on the door. The woman moved. She wasn't dead. She put a box on a table and closed it. Then she looked into Evelyn's eyes. Evelyn jumped, and suddenly it was 1933 again. Evie, what's wrong? Did you see something? Asked Rick. No, nothing. I'm okay. But look, there is a box on the table. Evelyn walked to the table and looked at the box. The Scorpion King, Evelyn cried. His face is on the top of the box. Let's open it. Evie, is that a good idea? Wasn't he a very bad man? Yes, but that was in 4000 before Christ. He's dead. It's not dangerous now. It's only a box. Alex was in a big room above his parents. He felt tired because he was bored with his ball game. Then he heard something. 3 men walked into the temple, but they didn't see the boy. Why are those O'Connells around here? The first man, Spivey, asked. Locknach told us about them. They aren't a problem. We have to get the box, the next man said. But maybe they'll find the box first. Then Locknach won't pay us. The last man's name was Jax. We'll kill them and take it. It was read again. Alex wasn't bored now. How could he help his parents? He watched the 3 men. They went down the stairs. 2 mummies in soldiers' clothes stood in the room with Rick and Evelyn. Rick didn't like mummies, but these 2 weren't dangerous. They were very dead. Rick, this is really exciting. I know the story of the Scorpion King. This is the box. Please open it quickly. Rick didn't like this idea, but he wanted to help his wife. He tried to open the box with his knife, but the top didn't move. Evelyn closed her eyes, and she could see the room in 1290 before Christ again. Suddenly she opened her eyes. She put her hand on the box and turned the Scorpion King's head to the east. The box opened easily. Look, it's the gold bracelet of Anubis, the god of the dead. Evelyn took the bracelet out of the box and shouted to Rick. Stop! Shouted Red. He and Jax and Spivey walked into the room with guns in their hands. Give the bracelet to me! But at that minute, the floor of the temple began to move. The walls started to fall on them. The 3 men with guns turned and ran up the stairs. Evelyn quickly put the beautiful gold bracelet back in the box and closed it. Put the box in your bag, Rick. Let's leave it here, shouted Rick. It's dangerous. No, it's important. Rick put the box in his bag and ran up the stairs with his wife. Alex was at the top. Quick, come this way, shouted Alex. Rick and Evelyn followed their son to the nearest door and outside into the sunlight. The temple fell down behind them. That bracelet is important, Rick said. It has strange powers. Red, Jax, and Spivey returned to Hamunaptra. Locknach's men were busy that night. They looked for Imhotep under the ground in Hamunaptra. Locknach was with the strange, beautiful Mila, and they had a dangerous plan. Mila had the Book of the Dead. Imhotep gave it to her in 1290 before Christ, when her name was Anxunamun. Anxunamun and Imhotep were lovers in that life. With this book, she wanted to give life back to the mummy of Imhotep. She wanted her lover back. We have to have the bracelet. It will take us to Akhmashir, said Mila. And we have to find Imhotep. With his great powers, he can kill the Scorpion King and take his soldiers. Imhotep will be king of the world. Mila wanted Imhotep's love. Loknach wanted the gold from the pyramid of Anubis. Loknach looked up and saw Red, Jax, and Spivey, but before he could speak, the ground started to move. "It's happening again!" cried Red. The men stopped working and ran away. Thousands of small black animals came out of the hole in the ground and followed them. When a man fell, the animals ate him in minutes. "Get some fire!" shouted Loknach. The men stopped the animals with fire, and then somebody shouted, "We have it! We have the mummy of Imhotep!" Mila carried the Book of the Dead with her and looked down at Imhotep. She put her hand on the mummy's hand and smiled. She wanted to love Imhotep again. Mila looked at Loknach and said, "Now we can begin." "Red, give me the bracelet," Loknach shouted. "Sorry, boss, no bracelet." Loknach's eyes looked dangerous. "We have to have the bracelet. Where is it?" he asked. "Those O'Connells have it," Red told him. "Then we will find them. The bracelet is ours." Chapter 3. Imhotep in London. The O'Connells arrived at their house in London on a cold, dark night. The sky was full of wind and rain. Evelyn wanted to learn more about Akhmashir and the bracelet of Anubis. She found an important book in her office and ran up the stairs. "Rick, look at this! With the bracelet we can find Akhmashir. We can be the first people there in thousands of years." "I'd like to stay home for a week or two," Rick said. "But Rick, Akhmashir is an important place in the middle of a desert. It has beautiful green trees and blue waters and a wonderful pyramid. So, it's beautiful and wonderful, right? There is nothing dangerous in Akhmashir, right? The Scorpion King and his soldiers are there, but they are dead or asleep," Evelyn said. "And when are they going to wake up?" asked Rick. "The story says they will wake up in the year of the Scorpion. And when is that?" "This year," answered Evelyn quietly. "But it's only a story." "I remember the story," said Rick. "The Scorpion King and his soldiers are going to wake up. They are going to kill everybody and everything. Let's forget about the bracelet. Let's leave the Scorpion King and his soldiers in Akhmashir." In the room below his parents, Alex looked into the dad's bag and found the strange box. It looked interesting, so he turned the Scorpion King's hand to the west and then to the east. Suddenly, the box opened and Alex saw a beautiful gold bracelet inside. He put his hand through the heavy bracelet and it closed around his arm. He pulled it, but he couldn't take the bracelet off again. Suddenly, the boy saw a different world in front of him. It was 4,000 before Christ, and he was in Egypt. He was in the great desert at Giza, and he could see 3 very large pyramids. He flew over the Nile River and saw the temple of Karnak. Then Alex was back in his house in London. "Alex," his mother called, "are you okay down there?" "I'm fine, Mom," the boy answered. He quickly pulled his shirt over the bracelet. Then he threw a heavy book into the box and closed it. "I have to get this bracelet off before my mother opens the box again," he thought. "Is everything all right, Alex?" Evelyn asked when he walked into the room. "Oh, yes, everything's great." In the room above, Rick put clothes into the closets. Then he heard something in the next room. He opened the door and saw Jonathan, Evelyn's brother. "That's him," shouted Jonathan. "He's O'Connell, not me." 4 Egyptian soldiers in red hats and a beautiful woman looked at Rick. They had guns and didn't look friendly. "Are you Connell?" It was Mila. "Yes, who are you?" asked Rick. "My name is not important. Give me the box with the bracelet of Anubis, or these men will kill you and this stupid little man." "I'm not stupid or little," cried Jonathan. "Be quiet, Jonathan. Madam, this is my house. You and your friends have to leave now." "I'm not leaving without the bracelet. Shoot them," she shouted to the 4 Egyptians. Rick jumped across the room and took 2 large knives from the wall. He threw one knife to Jonathan and killed the Egyptian next to him with the other. Rick and Jonathan ran into the bathroom and closed the door. "What do they want?" shouted Jonathan. "Evie found an old box and brought it home. They want the gold bracelet inside it. Now, let's go." Rick pushed Jonathan through the bathroom window and jumped out after him. They ran out of the yard. Evelyn heard something above her, but she had problems too. Locknach stood at the door with 3 soldiers. "Give me the box, now," he shouted at Alex. The boy had the box in his arms. "Get out of my house or I'll call the police," Evelyn said to Locknach and his men. "Mom, is that a good idea?" asked Alex. "I will take the box and kill your son," said Locknach. "No, you won't," said a man in black clothes. He stood at the door and carried a large knife in his hand. The 3 Egyptian soldiers in red hats moved away from Evelyn and Alex. "Adeth Bey," one man said quietly. Adeth Bey was the greatest of the Magi soldiers. They guarded the mummies in Egypt all night and all day. The mummies were very dangerous. They had to stay asleep. Adeth Bey first met Evelyn and Rick in 1923. He helped them win their fight with the mummy Imhotep. He sent Imhotep back to the world of the undead. Locknach jumped on Adeth Bey and started to fight. Evelyn took a large knife from the wall and helped the Magi. "Mom, you are great! You are really strong!" shouted Alex. "How can you do that?" "I don't know," Evelyn shouted back. A soldier took the box from Alex. Adeth Bey pushed his knife into the man's back and Alex had the box again. "What's in the box?" Adeth Bey shouted to Evelyn. "The bracelet of Anubis." Get it now and run," shouted Adeth Bey. "Now, quick! Locknach cannot have the bracelet." Evelyn took the box and began to run. A soldier stopped her. He carried Evelyn and the box to Locknach's car outside. Locknach hit Adeth Bey and the Magi fell to the floor. Then Locknach and his soldiers ran to the car. In the house, Alex sat on the floor next to Adeth Bey. He called for his father, but nobody answered. Outside, Rick and Jonathan heard the car start and ran to front of the house. Rick saw Evelyn in the car with Locknach, Mila, and some soldiers in red hats. Then Alex and Adeth Bey ran out of the house. "Dad! Dad!" Alex shouted. "They took Mom with them." "We are going after her now," said Rick. "Adeth Bey, what are you doing here?" "I'm following Locknach and that woman, Mila. They have the mummy of Imhotep in the British Museum." "What? Why didn't you and your men stop them?" "The woman Mila knows about mummies. She found Imhotep under the ground easily. She is very dangerous." "And now what's going to happen?" asked Rick. "They have Imhotep and the bracelet of Anubis. They will use those powers," said Adeth Bey. "They have Mom, but I have the bracelet," Alex said to his dad. He showed his arm. Adeth Bey looked afraid. "Mr. O'Connell, this is very bad. With the bracelet on your young son's arm, we have only 7 days before the Scorpion King wakes up." "I'm not interested in the Scorpion King," shouted Rick. "I want Evie back." "The Scorpion King will wake up and he and his soldiers will kill everybody and everything." "The end of the world?" asked Jonathan. "That's right," Adeth Bey answered. "But one person can kill the Scorpion King and take his powers." "And that's Imhotep's job?" asked Jonathan. "Right again. Locknach and Mila are going to wake up Imhotep. He'll be their king. The world will be theirs. We have to stop them and get Evie away from them. Get in the car. We are going to the British Museum, shouted Rick. At the museum, Rick and Audeth Bay jumped out of the car with their guns and knives. Stay here. Watch the car, Rick shouted to Alex and Jonathan. He gave the biggest gun to Audeth Bay. At the same time, the Magi saw the tattoo on Rick's hand. He looked into Rick's eyes. I am a stranger from the East. I am looking for an important person, he said slowly and carefully. Rick stopped. He remembered a time when he was very young and very sad. He had nobody, no parents, no sisters, no brothers. But he remembered the friendly face of an old man. The old man told the young boy, Don't be sad. You will have a better life with a happy home one day, and you will help many people. Remember these words. Rick remembered the words and said to Audeth Bay, I am a stranger from the East. You are looking for me. Mr. O'Connell, you can help me and my people. You are a Masonic Templar. You have the tattoo. I got it when I was a child in Hong Kong. What does it mean? You are a soldier for God. You will help many people. No, said Rick. It's a mistake. You are talking to the wrong man. He turned and ran into the museum with Audeth Bay behind him. It was the middle of the night and the museum was dark and full of strange sounds. Rick and Audeth Bay found the great Egyptian room and stopped at the door. They saw Evelyn and the people around her and watched quietly. The soldiers in red hats carried Evelyn to the middle of the room. There she saw the ugly mummy of Imhotep. Wake up and live. Wake up and live. Wake up and live. Locknach and the other men called to Imhotep. A light shone on the mummy's face, and slowly it began to move. First, its eyes opened, then its head moved, then its arms and legs. But they were not the arms and legs of a man. The mummy was not dead, but it was not of this world. It was undead, and it wanted its life back again. It spoke to Locknach and Mila in the language of old Egypt. What is the year? Great Imhotep, it is the year of the scorpion, said Locknach. Imhotep laughed and then looked at Mila. Anxunamun, is it really you? I am here, my love. I am waiting for you, the young woman answered. Then Locknach showed the Scorpion King's box to Imhotep. This is very good, said the mummy. Open it for me. But when they opened the box, they found an old book. Where is the bracelet of Anubis? Cried Mila. The boy, shouted Locknach. We will get the bracelet, said Mila. But look, we have this woman for you. We will watch her die. Imhotep looked at Evelyn and shouted, Kill her! The soldiers built a fire and carried Evelyn to it. Suddenly, Rick and Audeth Bay ran into the room with guns in their hands. Audeth Bay killed 2 soldiers and shot 2 other men. They fell into the fire and died. Rick shot at Imhotep, but guns couldn't hurt the mummy. Imhotep had a bottle of water from Hamunamtra, and he threw some of this water on the floor. Come, my soldiers, move your hands and feet. Suddenly, 4 soldier mummies came up through the floor and stood in front of Imhotep. Not more mummies, shouted Rick. Let's get out of here. He took Evelyn's hand and they ran from the museum. Audeth Bay followed them. Alex and Jonathan were outside in a big red bus. Where is my car? Rick shouted at Jonathan. A small problem, but we found this, Jonathan said. Forget the car, shouted Evelyn. Let's go. The 4 soldier mummies ran behind the bus. They were very fast. I hate mummies, said Rick. Then one mummy jumped on the top of the bus. From a window, Rick shot into its face. He couldn't kill the mummy, but he could stop it. The mummy looked at Rick with half a face and clapping through a window. At the same time, Audeth Bay shot 2 mummies at his window and shot off their legs. Their legs fell into the street, but the mummies moved down the bus with their hands. Evelyn saw the mummies inside the bus and shouted, "Turn, turn!" at Jonathan. When the bus suddenly turned, Adeth Bey fell to the floor. The two mummies fell on him. They cut his arm and face with their long, ugly teeth. Evelyn took Adeth Bey's gun and shot at the mummies. Their heads flew out the window. Adeth Bey pushed them through the door and they fell onto the street. Evelyn heard a noise above her. "Turn, turn, turn!" she shouted again to Jonathan. Above them, Rick fought with the mummy with half a face. The mummy was stronger than Rick. It took him in its arms and hit his head on the top of the bus. Suddenly, the bus turned again and Rick had a minute. He got his gun and shot the mummy again and again. But the mummy didn't stop. It threw Rick to the floor. It put one foot on Rick's gun and one on his head. Jonathan saw a bridge in front of them. "Oh no," he thought. "That bridge isn't very high." The bus hit the bridge hard. The bridge cut off the top of the bus. Glass flew into the street and the mummy fell to the ground. The bottom of the bus moved quickly away from the bridge. Rick slowly climbed down the stairs and saw his family and Adeth Bey. "You are a great driver, Jonathan," he said. "Is everybody okay?" "We are okay, but I hate mummies," said Alex. He smiled at his dad and then sat next to Jonathan, near a window. A mummy's arm suddenly came through the window. "Help!" Alex shouted. Rick ran to the front of the bus, but the arm pulled Alex out of the bus. It pushed him into Locknach's car. Rick and Evelyn watched the car drive away with their son inside. Chapter 4. A Trip to Old Egypt. Alex was on a train in the middle of the Egyptian desert with Locknach, Mila, and Imhotep. "Do you have the Book of the Dead?" Locknach asked Mila. Alex listened carefully. He knew about this important book from his mother. "Yes," answered Mila. "It will help Imhotep." A soldier came into the car. "Imhotep wants to meet the boy." Locknach pushed Alex to the other end of the train and into Imhotep's car. At the same time, the door of Mila's car opened and Red, Jax, and Spivey pushed inside. Red carried another interesting old box. It was from the most important museum in Cairo. "We got your box for you. Here it is. But we want 10,000 pounds for it, not 5. "We know about the thing inside it," said Red. "Yes," said Mila. "Imhotep's heart is inside the box. But he also has to have another person's life. Then he can live again." "That means more money for us," Jack said. 10,000 pounds is not a problem," said Mila. "Come with me to Imhotep's car. He will pay you." At the other end of the train, Alex looked around the dark car and saw the back of a tall man. But when the man turned around, Alex saw a face with no eyes in it. It was the face of Imhotep the Undead. He felt afraid. "You have the bracelet," Imhotep began. "You can take me to Amshire." "But I don't want to help you," Alex said. "You are your father's son, I see," said the mummy. "But you have very little time. The Scorpion King is going to wake up 7 days after you put the bracelet on." "I know about that." "You have to be inside the pyramid at Amshir before the sun shines on it on the 7th day." "Or what?" asked Alex. "Or you will die. The bracelet will pull your life out of you." "Nobody told me about that," cried Alex. He thought for a minute and said, "I only have 5 more days." "Very good. Now you understand, and now you will take us to Amshir, quickly." "My dad is going to get you. Wait and see," shouted Alex. Suddenly, Locknach heard Mila with Red, Jax, and Spivey. He left the car with Alex through the back door, and Mila came in with the 3 men in the box. "It's dark in here," said Red. "Isn't there a light?" Imhotep turned on a light, and the 3 men saw the mummy. They tried to leave, but Mila stopped them. "Open the box for the great Imhotep," said Mila. "No," shouted Jax, but Spivey put the box in front of the mummy and opened it. White smoke came out of the box. Nobody could see Spivey and Imhotep in the smoke, but they heard strange noises. Imhotep's mummy had its hurt back, and it pulled Spivey's life out of him. When Imhotep walked out of the smoke, he was not a mummy. He was Imhotep the Great, a beautiful, strong man with new life inside him. Spivey was on the floor, thin, white, and very dead. Rick, Evelyn, and Jonathan were back in Egypt too. They were in Cairo. They had to find Alex. When Alex put the bracelet on, he saw the pyramid at Giza and then the temple at Karnak, said Rick. At Karnak, the bracelet will show him the next place. In the end, it will take him to Ahmshir, Evelyn said. But we have to follow him. There is no map to Ahmshir. First, how can we get to Karnak? Asked Jonathan. No problem, said Rick. I know somebody near here. He has an airplane. In the desert near Cairo, Rick found his old friend Izzy in his office. The little man's smile left his face when he saw Rick. You, shouted Izzy. What do you want? You will get nothing from me. You always bring problems. Izzy, we are friends. We have to have an airplane. It's important. When I do a job with you, I almost die. Every time. The trip to Alexandria, the bank job, the night with the dancers. You are dangerous, said Izzy. Bank job? Dancers? Evelyn said. Rick, we have to talk. Later, Evie. We don't have time for old stories. Izzy, we have to find our son. He's out in the desert. We are going to Ahmshir. We'll pay you with gold from the great pyramid of Anubis. Now you are talking my language. I'll get ready. But suddenly they heard the sound of horses. Adeth Bey and 12 more Magi stopped in front of the building. "Oh, Connell," shouted Adeth Bey, "these are my best men. They will follow you and fight the mummy and the soldiers of Anubis. You will not always see them, but they will be near you." The 12 men went away across the desert, and Adeth Bey stayed with the O'Connells. "Thanks, my friend," said Rick. "Let's go. We can't lose more time. Izzy, where's your airplane?" "No airplane, Rick. I have a beautiful new machine. Look, it's behind this building." "Izzy, it's a balloon." "Yes, Rick, but it can take you to Hampshire. Are you ready?" The balloon moved above the desert, and Rick talked quietly to Adeth Bey. "What do you know about the gold pyramid at Hampshire?" "People find the pyramid and then they never return to their homes. They die at Hampshire. But remember 2 things. First, Lognach and Mila cannot hurt your son because he is wearing the bracelet. And second, you have the tattoo." "Is that really important?" "When you understand your job as a Masonic Templar, you will have great powers." "Great. But is Imhotep dangerous now?" "His powers are returning quickly. He will be stronger than the Scorpion King in 1 or 2 days." At the same time, Alex sat on the train with Lognach. He was hot and bored. "Can I go to the bathroom?" he asked. Lognach pushed Alex into the dirty bathroom. He stood outside and guarded the door. Alex looked around and saw a little window. He didn't think. He climbed through the window and jumped off the train. When he stood up, everything hurt, but he could see the temple of Karnak, and he ran to it. Behind him, Alex heard the train stop. Men shouted and ran after him. The boy arrived at the temple and ran inside. With the bracelet, Alex could see the temple of Philae in the desert in 2000 before Christ. But he returned to 1933 when Imhotep, now a man, not a mummy, stood in front of him with Lognach and Mila. "You are a very bad boy," said Imhotep. "I will watch you die at Hampshire. I will enjoy that." Lognach Take him outside. Imhotep and Mila had some important work. The two lovers sat near a pool of water in the middle of the temple. They looked into the pool and saw a picture of their life. Thank you, Anxunamun. You can teach me many things when you are my mother, said Nefertiri. She was the pharaoh's daughter and Anxunamun was his future wife. Wonderful, wonderful, cried the pharaoh. Two strong, beautiful women. My daughter can guard the bracelet of Anubis for me, and my future wife can guard me. He smiled at the women, but Anxunamun did not smile at the pharaoh. Her smiles were for Imhotep, her future husband's friend and king of the dead. Nefertiri saw this and hated Anxunamun and Imhotep. Many days later, Imhotep was in the pharaoh's bedroom with Anxunamun. The pharaoh found them and they killed him. Nefertiri heard noises and called for help, but her father was dead. Run, shouted Imhotep to Anxunamun. No, said Anxunamun, I will die and later you can bring me back to life. She took the pharaoh's knife and pushed it into her heart. Imhotep saw her die. In the temple at Karnak, Mila opened her eyes. She was not Mila, she was Anxunamun again. Anxunamun, said Imhotep, there is no end to our love. Now we can do anything. Another person watched the same picture in the pool. Evelyn or Connell was in the balloon, but she too could see the fight between Nefertiri and Anxunamun. She woke up when Anxunamun died. She was afraid and told the story to Rig and Audiobook. Rig, I was Nefertiri, the daughter of Pharaoh Seti I. I was a great fighter and I guarded the bracelet of Anubis, and now our son is wearing it. Audiobook looked at Rig. You are a soldier for God. You will help many people. You will love and guard Nefertiri and her son. That is your life. At the same time, Alex sat on the floor of the temple of Karnak. He couldn't move because Loknach guarded him. Please, can I have some water? Alex asked nicely. Loknach gave a cup of water to the boy. Then he turned his back and fell asleep. When Loknach was quiet, Alex built a little temple on the floor. Later that day, he left Karnak with Loknach, Anxunamun, and Imhotep, but his little temple of Philae stayed there. 2 hours later, the O'Connells, Jonathan, and Audiobook arrived at the temple of Karnak. They aren't here, said Jonathan sadly. Suddenly, Evelyn shouted, Rig, come and see this. It's the temple of Philae. Alex is giving us our map. Let's go. They returned to the balloon and followed Alex from Karnak to Philae and then to the temple of Abu Simbel. They followed the Nile River into the center of old Egypt. How can we find one small boy in this big country? Asked Evelyn. He'll leave us another building, said Rick. Chapter 5. Amshir. But Alex couldn't help his parents again. He started to make another temple at Abu Simbel, but Imhotep saw it. You are a smart boy, said Imhotep, and then he kicked the temple. No more buildings. This time I will give something to your parents. Imhotep looked into the river and spoke in an old Egyptian language. Suddenly a large wall of water came out of the river. Easy drove his balloon above the Nile between two tall mountains. He heard a strange noise and looked up, but the sky was blue and the sun shone. Then he saw the wall of water. Everybody, help! They saw the water and Imhotep's face was in the middle of it. Shoot it! Easy cried. That won't help, said Rick. I know this, Mummy. Turn. Easy turned the balloon right between two small mountains. The wall of water couldn't turn. It pushed down the middle of the Nile. After the water went past them, Jonathan said, People, look around you. They were in a wonderful place with green trees and blue waters. There were fruit trees and flowers everywhere. Ahmshir, said Ardeth Bey very quietly. It is, said Rick. I can see the top of the gold pyramid behind those trees. But suddenly they heard the sound of the wall of water again. Before they could move, the water threw the balloon into a mountain. Then it moved away. The 5 wet people on the ground were tired, but they weren't dead. Easy, said Rick. We are going to find Alex. Get this balloon ready. We'll have to leave quickly after we get him. But Rick, no buts. This balloon has to fly again. Let's go, shouted Ardeth Bey. The O'Connells and Jonathan followed the Magi to a place above the gold pyramid. They watched and waited for Alex. Imhotep, Locknach, and Anxunamun found Ahmshir that night. The bracelet on Alex's arm showed them and their soldiers the way. Near the pyramid, they saw dead soldiers from earlier times. Nobody came to Ahmshir and then went home again. It was a place for the dead. Suddenly, they found an open place in the trees, and they saw the gold pyramid in the evening light. Great, Imhotep, said Locknach. Can I kill the boy now? I don't want him. He's yours, Imhotep answered. Alex heard these words and started to walk quietly away. Locknach had his plans for the boy and began to follow him. Then he heard a strange sound in the trees. He stopped. Listen, Locknach said. Is it the dead? Are they singing? Something is coming, Anxunamun said. Get your guns ready, Locknach shouted at the soldiers. Suddenly a man cried, Help me! Nobody could see him. Locknach heard another cry and turned quickly. Something pulled another soldier under the ground. Then everything was quiet, but only for a minute. A lot of very short mummies came out of the ground. They are fought with the soldiers in red hats. They wanted to get the Book of the Dead from Anxunamun, but she and Imhotep ran through the trees. The little mummies were a problem, but Locknach forgot about them. He wanted to kill Alex. He looked into the boy's eyes, but Rick O'Connell jumped into the battle. Alex, Rick shouted. This way! Rick shot at the soldiers and at the mummies, but Locknach had Alex. Then Rick had some help. Ardeth Bey arrived and fought with Locknach. Rick put Alex on his back and ran. Ardeth Bey cut Locknach in half. Locknach fell to the ground and didn't move again. Ardeth Bey ran after Rick and Alex. They found Evelyn and Jonathan, and Alex jumped into his mother's arms. Everybody was happy for a minute. Dad, you have to help me, said Alex. I have to be inside the pyramid today before the sun shines on it. Oh, what will happen? Asked Rick. Or I will die. Let's go. The sky is getting light. We don't have much time, Rick shouted. The 5 people ran through the trees to the pyramid. The short mummies ran after them. Then they saw the bracelet of Anubis on Alex's arm and they stopped. The strange little mummies went away and it was quiet again. Rick, look, shouted Evelyn. There is light behind those mountains. The sun is coming up. Quick, run to the pyramid. Rick took Alex's hand and ran as quickly as possible. Their battle was now with the sun. They arrived at the door of the pyramid and ran inside. The sunlight was a meter behind them. Rick and Alex sat on the floor and smiled. You know, son, Rick said, life with you isn't always easy. Yes, but you like it, said the boy. At that minute, the bracelet of Anubis fell off Alex's arm. Rick threw it away. He never wanted to see it again. Jonathan and Evelyn arrived at the pyramid. Evelyn looked around for her son and husband. Jonathan looked at the gold. But before they could go through the door, Anxunamun arrived at the pyramid. She came near Evelyn and looked into her eyes. But she didn't see Evelyn. She saw Nefertiti. Anxunamun put her knife into Nefertiti's heart and threw her to the ground. Then she ran into the pyramid through a different door with Imhotep. They carried the Book of the Dead with them. Rick and Alex found Evelyn on the ground. "Dad, is she okay? Is she dead?" Evelyn opened her eyes. She wanted to say something. "Evie, don't talk. You will be okay," Rick told his wife. She opened her mouth and said, "Love you." Then Evelyn O'Connell died. Imhotep and Anshunnamun were now in the center of the pyramid. They saw a large gold square on the floor with the face of Anubis on it. Imhotep walked to the square and stood on the face. Suddenly, the floor began to move, and a loud noise came from under the square. White smoke came out of Imhotep's mouth and ears. Anubis took away Imhotep's powers. Imhotep slowly turned his head. He looked at Anshunnamun with sad eyes. "I am only a weak man now, not a god. I have to fight the Scorpion King without my powers," Imhotep said quietly. "No, you can't," cried Anshunnamun. "He will kill you. You can bring me back to life." A strange light came out of the floor and moved through the pyramid. The light woke up the Scorpion King and the soldiers of Anubis. Then it flew out of the pyramid and across the desert. Audiobook and the Magi soldiers saw this light and understood. It was the time for their greatest battle. "Don't go, please," cried Anshunnamun to Imhotep. But Imhotep smiled at his lover and left her. He walked through the pyramid. He wanted to find his future, but he found somebody from his earlier life. He found Rick O'Connell. Rick ran at Imhotep and the two men began to fight. Alex and Jonathan waited outside the pyramid next to Evelyn. Alex cried and cried. Jonathan watched. How could he help the boy? What could he say to him? "Your mother's in a better place," he began. "The good book teaches us." Alex stopped crying. "The good book, that's it," he shouted. He jumped up and ran into the pyramid. Jonathan followed quickly. They found Anshunnamun inside the door. "You killed my mother," shouted Alex. "And my baby sister," said Jonathan. He cut Anshunnamun's arm with his knife, and the Book of the Dead fell to the ground. The young woman was very strong, but Jonathan was angry. He fought well. Alex quietly took the Book of the Dead and went outside with it. He stood above his mother and began to read the words in the language of old Egypt. It was very difficult, and he read slowly. "Faster!" shouted Jonathan. "I can't stop this woman. She's going to kill me." Alex read the last word on the page. Anshunnamun's knife was near Jonathan's heart when suddenly Evelyn O'Connell was on her feet. "Jonathan, go and help Rick. This is my fight." The two women began their battle, Evelyn and Mila, Nefertiri and Anshunnamun. Evelyn remembered her fight with Anshunnamun 3,000 years earlier. She did not want to lose again. The two women kicked and hit. Anshunnamun fell to the ground. Evelyn was the winner, but she couldn't put a knife through Anshunnamun's heart. She couldn't kill another person in that way. Alex and Jonathan found Rick in a room with Imhotep. It was a difficult fight. They suddenly stopped when the door opened with a loud noise. The Scorpion King walked in. He had the head and arms of a man, but the legs of a scorpion. He looked at Rick and Imhotep with hate in his eyes. At the same time, Audiobook and 10,000 Magi fought the soldiers of Anubis. The Magi killed the 2,000 dog-faced fighters, but it was not the end. Next, 50,000 more Anubis soldiers came out of the ground. A new, more difficult battle began, but the Magi were strong and ready. They had to win this battle for their people and for the world. Inside the pyramid, Imhotep did not fight with the Scorpion King. He fell on the floor and cried, "Please, do not hurt me. I will follow you from this day. You are my king." The Scorpion King stopped and smiled at Imhotep. Then he turned and looked at Rick. Rick waited for him. The half-man, half-animal threw Rick across the room. His back hit a wall. Rick could see fire when he opened his eyes, but he also saw a picture on the wall and a very large golden knife next to it. The picture showed a pyramid with the eye of Horus at the center. It was Rick's tattoo. The Scorpion King hit him again, but Rick watched the picture. "I am a stranger from the east. You are looking for me," Rick shouted. Suddenly, the large gold knife was in his hand. But Rick didn't want to fight with men in red hats, short mummies, Imhotep, or the Scorpion King. He was tired. He was sad. His wife was dead. People want to kill his son. He wanted to stop. The Scorpion King threw Rick at another wall and he fell to the floor. Then he saw a woman's shoes and looked up. Evelyn smiled at him. "Evie?" Rick shouted. "Evie!" His wife was not dead. Now Rick was ready for the Scorpion King. Rick and the Scorpion King were in the middle of the room. Evelyn, Jonathan, Alex, Imhotep, and Anshunnamun watched the two fighters. Rick had the gold knife of the Masonic Templars in one hand, and he danced around the Scorpion King. The large man-animal hit Rick's knife with his scorpion legs, and it flew across the room. Rick caught it before it hit the floor. "Do something with that knife," shouted Jonathan. Rick jumped up and threw his knife at the Scorpion King. It hit the man-animal's heart and he fell. Then the room was full of black smoke. The smoke climbed to the top of the room, and then there was nothing, no smoke, no Scorpion King. At that minute, the floor opened and the walls moved. Rick and Imhotep stood near a large hole in the floor. "Rick!" shouted Evie. "No, Evie, stay back," Rick shouted. "Stay there." "Anshunnamun," Imhotep called. "Help me." But Anshunnamun did not move. Evelyn ran to Rick. She caught his arm, but he fell into the dark hole. With the powers of Nefertiti, she pulled him out. "Anshunnamun," Imhotep cried again. But his lover was not there. Imhotep looked at the O'Connells with hate in his eyes, and then he fell into the hole. It was the end of a long, strange life. Anshunnamun ran through the pyramid into a room with a picture of the Scorpion King on the wall. The floor moved and the walls fell. Thousands of scorpions came from behind the walls. They climbed on Anshunnamun's arm and legs, and her face and hair. They ate her in minutes. Rick, Evelyn, Jonathan, and Alex ran through the gold pyramid. The walls fell behind them. There was a strong wind outside. The sky was dark and dangerous. Rain started to fall. Rick wanted to help his family. The world looked crazy. Where could they go? Then he looked up. Izzy was above them in the balloon. "Quickly!" the little man shouted above the noise of the wind and rain. "I can't wait all day." The balloon moved down to the ground and everybody climbed into it. They looked down and watched the pyramid fall into a great hole. The wind and rain stopped and the world was quiet again. There was no Amshir. There was only desert and sun. "O'Connell," said Izzy, "did you have a hard day? You look tired." Rick laughed. "You know, mummies, scorpions, battles. Boring." "Dad, look!" shouted Alec. They all looked down at the desert below them. They saw Adeth Bey and his men. "Thank you!" they shouted from the balloon. "Thank you!" Adeth Bey put his hand on his heart and shouted back, "Goodbye, my friends. I will remember you always." Then the Magi returned to their work in the desert. Rick O'Connell suddenly felt happy. He remembered Adeth Bey's words about his tattoo. Maybe the Magi was right. He could help many people. He looked at his wife and son and smiled. "Let's go home," he said.